Thank you all so much again for joining. We're here to give an overview of our 2027 Design Your Own Fellowships application process. The application opened May 21st, 2026, and it will close September 17th, 2026. And we're here to give a little overview for you all and field some of your questions as well. Next slide, please. And we'll do a little overview of the agenda, and then we'll introduce ourselves shortly. So today's agenda will be covering Equal Justice Works overall mission and purpose, go into an overview of the Design Your Own Fellowships program, why you might consider applying to the Design Your Own Fellowships program, and how to develop a strong proposal to realize success in that application, as well as just some of the sort of typical administrative and components of an application and how to submit a strong application. I am Al Roberts. I'm Senior Manager of our recruitment and enrollment team. And so dealing with more of the administrative elements of the application, any sort of technical issues, our recruitment enrollment team will be available to assist with through our fellowships inbox, fellowships@equaljusticeworks.org. We'll be able to field any of those inquiries. And I'm joined by my colleague, Lauren. Lauren, if you want to give a little intro to yourself.
Sure. And I'm Lauren Hartley. I'm the Associate Director for Network Engagement here at Equal Justice Works. And I support a lot of our fellows and sponsors across the country, but particularly in the Northeast. I went to law school myself to be a public interest lawyer and practiced a little bit in immigration law and worked at a couple different law schools before I came on to Equal Justice Works as a staff member. So I know some of you from the law schools and have seen some of you before, so glad to be here today. In today's webinar, we are focused on host organizations and law school advisors. So this is really meant to help equip you all who are working together with candidates as you're putting together these applications. And so we want to make sure you are feeling well equipped and well prepared to do that. So others, of course, are welcome, but that is the focus in particular of today's webinar. So just a reminder, who's Equal Justice Works. We are celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. We were founded in 1986 by public interest law students who wanted to create pathways into public interest law. And that really remains at the core of our mission. We are the largest postgraduate legal fellowship program in the US. Right now we have I think it's around 180-ish fellows in the fields right now, rolling off and on. We also have our law student summer program going on right now. We have been a leader over the years in public service loan forgiveness, student debt resources in the past decades. We work with many of the law schools that are represented today. We have over 180, around 180 member law schools. And over the years, we've had almost 3,000 alumni, and around 85% of them stay in public service immediately following their fellowship. And now, many years on, a lot of them are running organizations. Some of you may be here on the webinar, but running organizations themselves, executive directors or legal directors. They're clinical professors, law professors, nonprofit professionals, civil rights attorneys, government, looking a little bit different these days, but all over. So we're very, very proud of that. We are going to focus today on what we call our Design Your Own Fellowship program. So that's the DYO fellowship, you may hear us call it. And that's the one that we're going to be talking about mostly today. I do want to mention briefly that we do have another set of fellowships we call our cohort programs. And those are a group of fellows working on a particular organization, and that comes from a particular grant. So for example, we have our disaster resilience fellows, or we have a opioid response cohort. And those timelines are open on a rolling basis, sort of according to grant deadlines. So just something to keep an eye on if you're hiring or if you're advising folks who are looking for jobs. So for right now, I think we've got a couple of folks that are hiring. So a 3L that's graduating right now might be able to apply for those. Or if you work with alumni, they might be able to apply for those. And if you are a host organization, we'll periodically be putting out calls for those positions for you to host them as well. So just a note that that is another one of our offerings. And then we'll go back to focusing on the Equal Justice Works, the Design Your Own Fellowships, the DYO fellowships. Okay, so quick overview of the DYO fellowships. I know a lot of you are familiar, but we just want to cover those components. So we think of it as being kind of four main components, and those are the project, so the substantive work that's being done, the candidate or the fellow who's actually doing the work, the host organization, who is their employer and is supervising and supporting and really working with them on a day-to-day basis, and then our sponsors. So a unique element and component of our fellowships, as opposed to some of the other models, is that we have a lot of our sponsors who are involved. And we'll talk a little bit more about each of these components in turn. I am going to cover just like the basic overview for each of these components, and then we'll get into questions about them. And talking about our recent classes of fellows, so you can see we just announced our class of 2026 a few weeks ago. So they're starting this fall in September. We have 60 fellows that will be going into work in the field. And that was the same in 2025. We also had about 60 fellows. Before that, we had 84. So kind of a big jump there, but 60 fellows the last 2 years. I also want to note this versus application numbers. So sometimes people ask, like, how many people apply and how many people get a fellowship? The last 2 years, we've had around 300 applications and then selected around 60 fellows. So, the stats are pretty good. That's 1 in 5 for folks who go through the work of putting together the application and submitting a proposal, fairly decent odds of being selected. So just wanted to note that at the top. Our class of 2026, again, those 60 fellows, they are serving all over the country, 21 different states and in Washington, D.C. They do come to us from 35 different law schools. They're at 54 different host organizations, some of you who may be on today. And between them, they have 61 unique sponsors. So we've of course, got fellows in major cities, New York, DC, Chicago, Dallas, Los Angeles. But we also have fellows who are going to be working in Ohio, and I've got a fellow that's going to be in Alaska, and Colorado and Missouri. So all over the country, really. Hopefully you've already done this, but if you haven't, just a reminder that our Meet Our Fellows page is a great resource to kind of see some of the similar types of projects and where people have worked before and what they've done. And you can filter by these different filters that are on the page there. Service location does go by state. So if you're looking for a particular city, you have to drill down a little bit. But that's there. So I encourage you to look, by various filters, law school, issue areas, etc. So you can check that online. Okay, so a design your own fellowship. Like, why would someone apply for it? Why should you support candidates who are applying for it, or should your organization apply for it? And what is it? More about it. So we often talk to candidates about the main benefit of a design your own fellowship being that they get to design their dream job out of law school, right? So that's on the candidate side, can be pretty appealing. They get to choose the kind of work that they want to do and who they want to do it with. There's also other benefits we talk about, like being part of our alumni network, being part of the national network of our fellows, getting to participate in our learning and networking, etc. But if you're a host organization, or if you're thinking about taking on a fellow, I think there's some other things to think about too, is that it helps create an entry-level hiring pathway. As we know, in public interest law, it is always challenging, and times are more uncertain than ever, and budgets are always uncertain. And there's just not these big classes of, fellows typically, or attorneys that are being hired typically, like at most organizations outside the very largest. So this can kind of help unlock, a fellowship helps unlock this source of private funding to maybe bring someone in that you otherwise might not have the funds to be able to hire. Um, I know everyone would love more staff attorneys, and if I had the staff attorney like magic wand, I would wave it, but I don't have that magic wand. So I do think this is an option to be thinking about. It can also help organizations like pilot a new area of work. So again, I know everyone needs more staff attorneys, but there are often also other things that orgs want to do, right? So like, man, we'd really love to provide this service, but we just don't have the staff for it. Or I really want to take these services to this community that we haven't been able to reach yet. And how could we do that? A fellow could be an interesting way to pilot that. It can also, host organizations have found sometimes that this will give like proof of concept for them to go make the argument, internally, like to their own board or to their own, leadership, um, or then to other funders as well. Um, our fellowships also can help build relationships with our sponsors, who are firms, legal departments, and foundations, et cetera. So just some other things to think about as benefits of design your own fellowship or why you might apply. So again, going back to those components, I'll talk about the eligibility for those. So who is an ideal candidate? So they do need to graduate as a member of a law school. Graduate from one of our member law schools by September of 2027, which is when the fellowship term begins, with a GD or an LLM. They do need to have work authorization for the 2 years of the fellowship. So for that reason, it's typically not a great fit for like international students who need a visa. Just noting that now. Our eligibility also is really geared towards candidates who have not yet had a permanent full-time public interest attorney position. So very often our candidates are applying when they're a 3L, or going into their 3L year, or maybe they're in, a clerkship, or in a school kind of bridge fellowship, something like that. All this information, by the way, it's on our website. We have a host org guide, we have a candidate guide, we have FAQs. All of that information is there as well. And I will highlight, we are not looking for a particular grades or like class rank. We actually don't even ask for transcript or GPA. Those are not a part of our application. We really are looking for candidates, that have a demonstrated commitment to public interest, and they've got the background and skills, to carry out the proposed project. So looking at the project, what does it need to be? We're pretty open to lots of different types of work. And if you look at our website, you'll see that we have candidate fellows who have done work in all sorts of areas all over the country over time. The project does need to serve, an underserved population and address an unmet need or an underaddressed legal issue. So we say that it needs to be innovative in that way. But what we mean by innovative is that it's not something that that's already being done, or a need that's already being met with your current staffing, right? So it's an unmet need. It can be a combination of direct representation, impact litigation, community education and outreach, policy, coalition building. Know your rights presentations are part of many of our presentations. Most of our projects are all a combination of these things. Our fellowships cannot fund standard criminal defense, so traditional public defender work or international law work. We do have folks who can do projects at holistic defense organizations. Some of that depends on the host organization, which I'll talk about in a minute. So keys to success for the project here, it does need to be, again, distinct from a staff attorney position, unique in some way. And it's piloting new legal services or meeting the needs of a new community. It should be ambitious yet feasible. So something that's appropriate for 2 years. You've got an entry-level attorney kind of doing 2 years of work. So what can make it done in 2 years? And hopefully looking ahead to sustainability. What is the project going to leave behind? Not every organization is able to hire on, their candidate to do the exact same type of work, or their fellow to do the same work going forward. we understand that. But what is going to be the outcome of the project? So is there going to be like trainings or a handbook that they're going to leave behind for maybe for other internal staff or other community members? Is there some sort of clinic that they're maybe able to set up? Is there some other sort of area of work that they're able to leave behind as part of the project? Host organization eligibility, so we'll just talk about this. So it does need to be a nonprofit organization with a legal staff. So it doesn't have to be specifically a legal services organization, but you do need to have a legal staff. Um, you do need to be a 501c3 or 501c4. So like law school clinics, for example, may be able to host, depending on their tax status, really is what it comes down to. The host organization needs to be able to provide benefits, health insurance, office space, whatever you're guaranteeing to your others, and we say similarly situated attorneys is what you should be offering a fellow. And you also need to be able to support and supervise those new attorneys. So some further guidance kind of in our FAQ is that we look for organizations to have at least 2 attorneys that are doing legal services on staff as the main part of their job. Just to have at least, you got to have a supervisor and at least a backup for a fellow. Probably a little bigger than that is probably ideal, but really being able to show that you're going to support and supervise a new attorney. And then a host organization does need to be based in the US or our territories. And again, you're looking for supervisors that are going to be providing good supervision, so they've got experience in the project area. We also, like to see that it aligns with the strategic vision and mission of your organization. So it should make sense, with what the organization is already doing, and just demonstrated fit. A couple other notes for host organizations I did want to highlight here. So the host organization is the fellow's employer. So you are the day-to-day employer-employee, relationship. So keep that in mind. Again, you need to be able to offer to a fellow or a candidate the same as what's being offered to other similarly situated employees. There's a supporting payment that goes to all of the host organizations that is paid in quarterly installments. And you're able to use that for their salary, I think, in French. And then we do ask that supervisors are contributing to sort of semi-regular reports that the candidates are sharing with us. So it's not monthly. Don't worry, it's the 6-month mark, the 1-year mark, and the 2-year mark. So hopefully a fairly light lift for you all. And we do give that information at the beginning of the fellowship. We've got sample reports and kind of go through that with fellows. We also will hold a host organization onboarding towards the beginning of the fellowship term and talk about that as well. I will pause here and see if there's any questions about host organization eligibility or other components about host org. So Al, are there any questions that you would like
Yeah,
me to address?
absolutely. Just saw one pop up in chat about the $66,500 in fellow stipend, fellow support that the program offers. That can be applied to both salary and fringe benefits in the manner that the host organization deems most useful. However, the attorney fellow, it needs to be in alignment with what a first-year attorney at your organization would be being paid in terms of the salary rate, if that makes sense. And that goes into a document, a certification document that's submitted at the time of the application, where you sort of certify what the fellow's pay rate will be, and you certify that it will be in alignment with comparable attorney positions at your organization. So I hope that clarifies that piece. I don't see any other questions just yet, but please feel welcome.
Okay. Yeah, if you've got other questions about eligibility or the host orgs, please let us know. Yeah. Okay, I am going to talk next. We'll talk about sponsors. So this is the piece that I want to highlight for you all, particularly like this year, last couple of years. This is kind of more, I think, prominent than ever. Our fellowships are funded through our sponsors. They're donors. we also think, there's an ongoing relationship as part of our model. It's not that they just give us money typically and we never see them again. There is kind of ongoing engagement with our sponsors. So our sponsors are very often it's law firms, corporate legal departments, foundations, and some individuals. Say the majority are law firms and corporate legal departments. Most years, they are the ultimate audience for the proposal, for the fellowship proposals, right? So they are engaged in the selection process. Um, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how that works as we go through it. So they're providing financial and other forms of support. They are expressing, interest in particular maybe issue areas or geographic priorities. We will publish. We don't have these published yet right now, but we'll publish them around the end of the month, beginning of July. What we know about sponsor preferences or priorities at that time. Um, and we do have sponsors that are funding across the country, all kinds of work, doing all sorts of things all over the country. And every year we get questions like, should I only apply if my sponsor preferences are on this list on our website? And the answer is no. Like, please, it is not an exclusive list. And we encourage applications if they fit kind of all of the other criteria in all geographies and all issue areas. And there are projects that are selected every year that are not ones that were like particularly highlighted on our sponsor preferences list once that gets published. So to talk to you a little bit more about what this looks like for our sponsors. Hold on. So I've got this a little bit later, but our sponsors, so at the same time is that I'm talking to you all and we're working with candidates and you all to develop proposals. I am also talking to our sponsors, so the law firms and corporate legal departments that I work with. And they are telling us now if they're going to be renewing their support and sponsoring a fellow in the class of 2027. We've got an early bird deadline at the end of June, so we're getting on our early commitments now. And I've got a number of those, like about half dozen already in hand. And those folks are very often, the pro bono counsel at a law firm, or maybe the leaders of the pro bono committee at a corporate legal department. Sometimes when we have more than one sponsor, it's co-sponsors. So it's a law firm and a corporate legal department that are sponsoring together. And typically that's because the law firm provides services to the corporation. So that's their client. And the corporation is very often asking the firm to come and sponsor with them. And the firms will do it because it's good for their relationship, right? Because the corporation is going to pay them to do legal work. And so it's a nice way for them to build that relationship. And sometimes they might be looking at doing pro bono together across the corporate legal department and the firm, with their fellow. That's quite common. So sometimes it is, again, pro bono counsel that are the folks that are on the review committee or on the selection committee. Very often, though, those folks are not full-time employees. The chair of the pro bono committee at, a corporate legal department is probably doing that part-time. And so it's someone who does, I don't know, probably not M&A, but like intellectual property law, or maybe they do employment law, but they're also really passionate about pro bono. And so it's their turn to be on the pro bono committee. And those are very often the folks that are like involved in our process and then maybe working with the fellows. So I just wanted to like highlight that. And again, we have those folks like all over the country doing all different kinds of work. Any questions about the different components, the basic eligibility for any of those? No, not yet. Okay. Okay, well, we'll move on.
Just
Okay,
a reminder.
we'll talk a little about project design. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just
Go
going to
ahead,
say, just a reminder to please make use of the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom application to submit any questions. It'll help us to track those questions as they come in. Appreciate it.
Sure. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about project design and selection and the selection timeline. So I recommend if you are thinking about working with a candidate or you're developing a project, kind of these major phases of the design or of developing an application. So you want to be coming up with a concept, what maybe is the idea of what the project is going to be. And that should be a collaboration, hopefully, between the host organization and the fellow or the candidate. Then you're going to be designing the project, refine and review that project, and then submit it in mid-September. Um, as I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of different issue areas. This is from the class of 2025. Some of our most common issue areas were immigrant populations, criminal justice reform, children and youth, affordable housing, and disability rights, education, special education, those have remained pretty similar for 2026, actually. Immigration dropped a little bit down the list and affordable housing came a little bit higher, but stayed fairly consistent, those top few issue areas. If you're also thinking about, again, checking out the fellow archive, if you're looking for fellows that have done sort of similar projects, that issue area search feature can be helpful to look for that if you're looking in particular types of projects for inspiration or reference. If you're at a law school, maybe you have alumni who have been fellows before, project-based fellows, you can look to Equal Justice Works alums, also Skadden alumni. You know, we know many candidates and organizations are applying to both Skadden and us at the same time with a similar project. And so the project design can look somewhat similar there. Things to consider as you're designing this project, of course, the expertise and mission of your host organization, scope and scale of your current work, impact of the project. So who is it going to help? Is this, a project that's going to help 200 people in 2 years? Is it a project that's going to help 10 people in 2 years? What is the, potential impact here? Um, we and our sponsors really like to see and know, I think, kind of notice when there is a strong alignment, I say, between the proposed work, the host organization, and the candidate. So does this candidate have the right background, experience, and skill set to move this work forward? Another thing to think about is, the resilience of the project and the host organization. And this is something I know because of some of the broader context we've seen in the last, year or two, where organizations that have had very vulnerable funding streams, have had to really cut back, have had to let go of staff or, have lost big chunks of funding. It really sucks. Equal Justice Works lost a chunk of funding. Um, so we know what it feels like. But just something to think about when you're thinking about, designing a project. Also, we've had, fellows who had projects that were designed before the current administration came into office, and then the current administration came in, and then the law looks very, very different. So say it's a project that relied on enforcement of, Title IX or Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, or a particular section of the ADA. And then that can kind of change overnight with an executive order. So what does it look like to plan a project out on the timeline that we have? So you're developing a project now that's going to be submitted in September, and then the candidate is starting in September of next year, and then they're going to do the work for 2 years. So really, it's the ability to forecast out kind of 3 years. What does it make sense to propose? I think every year we get some projects that are very, very timely, like around things that were happening in August of that year. Things that were really in the news or maybe that summer. Um, and sometimes by, January, when we're in the interview cycle, those issues aren't as timely anymore, or it doesn't make as much sense. So just something to think about when you're thinking about what's the unmet need, right, that this project is going to meet and what's the work it's going to do. What's the balance between what's needed and timely and what is going to still be needed in 2 to 3 years from now. Also, again, be thinking about the sponsors. So I said this before about who our sponsors are. Again, a note that they're all over the country. So there are legal departments and organizations that are working in states um, that have anti-DEI laws, right? So if there's language in a proposal that would violate those state laws, they might not be able to select it um, because of their own internal procedures, right? I know we've had host organizations. Some of you may be in those states that are dealing with this, and so then how do you write a proposal that is going to still obviously meet an unmet need? Um, and I think there it's really about the language, right? So I live in Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C., we have wards, our big kind of neighborhoods, and wards 7 and 8 in Southeast DC are traditionally low-income Black communities. I had a fellow who was working there the past couple of years, and she was doing a maternal health project. Um, and her proposal could be written, as she wrote it several years ago. Her proposal was going to serve Black low-income mothers in, Washington, D.C., Ward 7 and 8. If she was writing that proposal now, she might change that language a little bit and just say serving low-income mothers in Ward 7 and 8, because it's still going to serve largely the same population, and be able to be considered by a broader array of people just because of the language. I know that's like frustrating and silly to have to be thinking about at times, but it's kind of the reality of where we are. So it's just something I encourage you as you're working with candidates to be thinking about. The other thing I want to say about our sponsors is some of the times one of the things I see applications and candidates do is if they're written very much for a public interest audience, right? So for sort of other like public interest funders or public interest attorneys. But again, our sponsors are typically not that, right? They are private sector attorneys, usually, or private funders or individuals who care a lot about these issues in a general way, but maybe don't have the same level of knowledge and expertise. So I just encourage you to think about when you're writing the proposal, it's not quite just talking to like a random stranger on the street, but think about it more like someone you might meet at, I don't know, like a bar association event or like a law school alumni event who's in the private sector and they sort of have like general probably knowledge and ease around the language, but they may not be in it like day to day. Um, so be thinking about that as you're writing. Um, some of our key sponsor preferences. So I wanted to highlight that we do know, and we will be, publishing this on our website in coming weeks. So projects around children and youth, reentry and expungement are popular topics, healthcare access and medical legal partnerships, veterans, benefits work, kind of bread and butter benefits work. I wanted to say we've had a rise in interest in projects using like tech for good. So projects, for example, we had one that's starting in the fall in North Carolina, and he's going to be working with Legal Aid of North Carolina and will be supporting their AI-powered chatbot that helps pro se folks work through the benefits and forms and systems needed, particularly around Hurricane Helene and what's happened with Hurricane Helene. So communities in rural Western North Carolina. Legal Aid of North Carolina has been a leader in kind of pro se support and has had different kind of chatbots for a long time. So this for them is like just iterating on their next version. And this fellow is really going to be kind of like the human in the loop and keeping an eye on it and making sure that all the resources that are there that need to be there, and also looking at ways to like move the work forward and to serve the clients that need to be served. So that's an example of one project we have. Another one we have in this category is a fellow who is going to be working at the Ohio Innocence Project and using AI to help review a backlog of case requests for consideration. There's like a 10 or 12,000 request backlog that they have, and so he's going to be working on using those tools to speed up that process and hopefully help more people. So that's a couple examples of what folks are looking for. We do work with a number, firms and tech companies that really are adopting AI, large language models, and they're interested to see in how it can be used for pro bono and for public interest. So it's a real area of interest, and I encourage you to think about if you have, I think a lot of students are also kind of on the leading edge of this too, and are comfortable with it and are wanting to get into it more. So I encourage you to give it a good think if there's an idea there. And other preferences will be announced in coming weeks. As I said, we'll post it on the website and we'll email. And we'll try to get those out, balancing of when we know and not getting too late in the summer because we know you need time to prepare. Okay, so I'm going to review the timeline for after the application is submitted, which again due September 17th. By October, fellowship alumni will review our applications. They do give us a qualitative review, and really feedback on whether we think whether they think it's a strong project or not, and is one that is going to, do well. I would say this is not like we don't use this as a cut score. I know that's like a myth that is kind of out there, but it is not used as a cut score. It is really more about qualitative feedback for these projects. And it is one factor of many that goes into how the applications move forward. Because then, starting in November, we will have interviews, and there we are putting together a packet we call it a slate of applications that our sponsors are looking at. So maybe 8 to 10 that fit the criteria of kind of what they're looking for. We send them that slate of applications. They will review and say, okay, we're going to interview these 4 candidates. They interview the candidates and then they make an offer. And that will be happening starting in November, going into February, March. We always say we want to finish in March. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer, but the goal is always to finish by March. And in that process, we do recommend doing a mock interview if you can. But it moves fast, so we know that's not always possible. We will announce the class in May of next year. We leave fellows alone typically during the summer. A lot of them are taking the bar exam. And then they will start their work at host organizations in September of 2027. And then it's a 2-year term from there. So any questions about what I've covered recently?
We did have one question come in just recently. How common is it for a student to get to the point where they're being included in slates, but not eventually getting funded?
Yeah, good question. Well, so like I said, last year we had about 300 applications and 60 that were selected. And I would say the vast majority of our applications are, seen in a slate at least once. Um, and it does happen that candidates sometimes interview multiple times and are not selected for whatever reason. So yeah.
More questions coming in. Two-part question from Oprah. The guide says that the host must provide insurance, but my HR person wants to know if that means we just that we have to offer access to health insurance or actually cover the cost. And that does mean to cover the cost. So similar to other employees at your organization, the fellow needs to be provided the same benefits as a similarly placed staff attorney would. And the second part, start dates. Is there flexibility on start dates so the fellow can start on one of the host organization's approved onboarding dates? We have a bit of flexibility there, but generally it should be around the September 2027 window. I think we've adjusted things to maybe start a week or two ahead of that.
I should say in the month of September, right?
Right.
So we ask that fellows begin in the month of September of their term. So you and the candidate can decide on which date is optimal within the month.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and anything beyond that is sort of special circumstances that we would need to review on a case by case basis. So that covers that portion. Aaron asks, can you please explain the differences, if any, in this year's application compared to previous applications? And so we have made some revisions to the application. We encourage you to take a look on our website. You can get a sort of good at a glance look at the entire content of the application through a reference Word version document of the application content. I'm going to drop that in the chat right now. Um, but encourage you to take a look at it. It's mostly sort of rearrangement of questions, but there are some substantive changes as well in sort of how we propose the question prompts and sort of the amount of content that we're looking to hear back from in responses to those prompts. So please do review the application content because it is it is it has changed from last year even. So definitely encourage you to take a look there. Um, for interviews, how can we prepare other than mock interviews? What will the interviewers be looking for? Great.
Yeah, great question. So on interviews, so we do send out a message at the beginning of the interview cycle with sample interview questions. So yeah, a mock interview is great to start for that. I think just making sure you're really comfortable, I think with the all the different parts of the application. Sometimes because of the timeline, sometimes there can be a gap of several months, and for a student, most of a semester between, when they've applied and when they're being interviewed. So things can get a little stale. So I think making sure that they are um, refreshing themselves of all of the parts of the application is really important. And then I would say, in what sponsors are, what interviewers are looking for, it's really the ability to um, bring to life what's put on paper. Right. So I think this is something also to think about when you are looking for a candidate. They do need to be able to go in 30 minutes and talk to a bunch of, firm folks or corporate folks and be able to explain what they're doing. So being a good and compelling communicator is important. We again give folks recommendations we give them sample interview questions and give them some recommendations. So having an opening statement is really important. Having a good, compelling opening statement is good. Sometimes I see candidates go on for like way too long. They'll go on for like 6 or 7 minutes. And we recommend it be more like 3 minutes as their initial overview. I think being responsive to questions is important. Sometimes kids, of course, get nervous, right? Um, and just kind of start talking, and they're maybe not actually responding to the question that was actually asked. So I think that's really important when you're in the mock interview, practicing that, like maybe throw them a little bit of an oddball question or give them a multi-part question and see if they can handle it and like volley that back to you. Um, and then I think also being able to give examples. So we talk about using the STAR method. So like situation, task, activity, response, whatever it is. I really encourage your candidates to do that, like making it personal, right? So being able to give an example of client impact by maybe an anonymous client example, or like, I worked with a client called Jose this summer, and this was his issue, and this is what we did to solve it. Or, yes, in my clinic, I previously had to lead a project on training and providing new materials to other students. And here's how I thought about that and went through that process. So those are some tips that I would recommend for your mock interviews. Other questions?
We have a question in the chat. Are students asked or required to disclose if they are applying to other fellowships with this application? And the answer to that is yes. That is an
We
explicit
do,
question.
yeah.
It is a required question to respond to for submission. Um,
That is,
and
I would say, mostly for our informational purposes and for timing purposes. That's not, we don't, hold it against people. We
right.
understand that they're applying to other things. It's really mostly to help us in sort of like timing and expectations and understanding if there's any deadlines of, because sometimes sponsors will say to us, oh, we're really interested in, youth homelessness projects in Seattle, and we might only have two applications in our pool. So we might look at those applications and say, okay, well, like we know these candidates are available. But sometimes if like another candidate said, oh yeah, I have applied and it's like a December 1st deadline, then we might be able to communicate to that sponsor, hey, if you want to interview these two candidates, you need to do it sooner rather than later. So that's really why we ask that question.
We have one additional question in the Q&A, asking if could a fellow decline the host organization's offered health insurance if they're already covered by a spouse's plan? And of course, that's more of an employee relation question, but as long as the insurance is offered, if the fellow ultimately opts out or declines, then that should be acceptable, of course.
Thanks. Yeah. I think we'll move forward from here. And we've only got a few minutes left, so I want to make sure we get through, and then we'll do a few more questions at the end. I want to talk about how you might pair up. So, well, one of the common questions we get is how candidates or host organizations can find each other. So, if you're thinking about looking for candidates for a fellowship, where do you do that? I think usually the most common is your kind of existing pool of interns or students who have worked with you before, or maybe employees. Maybe they worked with you when they were paralegal before they went to law school, something like that. I think looking for a strong public interest background connection is really important. Also, someone who can take on the work of a fellowship project, right? So this is a 2-year position as a new attorney, and they're doing a different kind of work than anyone else on your staff. So is it someone who seems like they're going to be able to rise to that, challenge, to take that on? Someone who's very entrepreneurial and proactive. And I think that really comes out in the application process. So you sort of see, like, are they reaching out to you and asking you about timelines? Are they, answering in a timely manner? Are they getting their parts done? Things to be thinking about. And that prior connection is really helpful, but it's not necessary. So every year we do have folks who have paired up who have never worked together before. And they're usually most successful when they've had a series of conversations where they have been very direct and very clear on what everyone's expectations are and what their work they're going to do and how they're going to be doing it. Very often, those candidates have also reached out to other folks who are at your organization or who have worked at your organization in the past. They've done their homework, right? So that's usually a strong candidate there. You want to also make sure you're understanding the timeline and the interview process. So again, someone who is comfortable kind of dealing with the uncertainty of our timeline and the interview process. And I'll note, they need to be comfortable interfacing with our sponsors in the private sector, giving maybe pro bono presentations or giving trainings. I know I was a public interest student kind of all the way through and really did not have much experience with the private sector. And so that was something I needed a little help, like understanding. So that's okay, but just making sure that they're kind of up for that challenge. And on the point of like pro bono and presentations, I love to see someone who's been a teacher before law school. They're usually great at that. They can develop curriculum and give lesson plans. Love to see that. They usually do really well in interviews. Also, anyone who's been like a paralegal or a legal assistant before usually does great in interviews. They get it. And honestly, just any candidates who have had some work experience is a real help. They just have a little bit more of that understanding of navigating a workplace and being able to move forward the work over the term of the fellowship. So things to keep in mind. So I think we've talked about this. I did want to say, so if you were thinking about posting for a candidate, if you haven't done it yet, you need to put a call out. So definitely look at your existing pool, but also psjd.org, which you may have used when you were a law student. If you haven't used it recently, you should log in. You still alumni get to use it too, and employers get to use it too. So publicservicejd.org still out there, still doing great work. You'll see other examples of fellowship calls there. So definitely post there. Some people also post on Idealist. I think they can be a little bit clunkier, but that's a place. LinkedIn, law school career services sites. So if you want to put out a call, make sure you're talking to your law school advisor folks. They are your best friends in this and can help you identify candidates. Also, I would say clinicians, like leaders of the local clinic. If you're looking at a benefits project and there's someone at your local law school that does benefits, make sure you talk to them and see if they have any candidates they would recommend. And yeah, so all of those are good sources. Um, Making sure you're including in your solicitation like the basics about what you're looking for. It's very common for organizations to ask for like a couple um, ideas, like a couple paragraphs typically on like what a candidate might want to work on, and then include a resume. And then you'll have conversations from there about moving forward. But if there's anything else that you need, like if, if it's an immigration project and they need to be able to speak Spanish, make sure you're including that. Other experiences, make sure you want to include that there. I think make sure you talking to your candidate early on around all the expectations and get to know each other. They're going to be your employee for 2 years. So, there's lots of different things you can consider talking about. They're on the screen there. I think making sure you're thinking through support for the project and supervision is important as well. So maybe you are the internal champion for this project, but who's the second in command if, God forbid, you get sick or you decide to take another job? You have an amazing opportunity. You go elsewhere. Who is still going to be on call to help support that candidate? I'm going to go through this quickly. So, assemble a team we recommend this for review. So, not at the host organization, the proposed supervisor and the relevant leadership, like the executive director, has to be involved in signing, a certification form. But also, if you have a pro bono director or manager, please talk to them because they understand this piece that is very important to our application. And they also understand the relationship with some of like the law firms and corporate legal departments that may be potential sponsors. So please make sure you loop them in, at least on that section of our application, which is available online. Again, Law School Career Advisors, Public Interest Center, please talk to those folks. We love them. They are so great resources for you and can help review. You can also consider alumni, so Equal Justice Works alumni, but other project-based fellows like Skadden Fellows will also have, could review as well. So really think about who this like team is going to be. Make sure you understand the application. This is online. We do have a blank example on our website, so you can look at that now. We encourage you to create an account now. Keep in mind that submission is a collaborative process, so there's parts that you, the host organization, have to fill out, and there's parts the candidate needs to submit, but they are going to be the ultimate submitter. So make sure that you're co-creating one application. So make sure that you're really timing that out. Mid-September, it's right after August holidays, often Labor Day. You want to make sure you're really timing that out around vacations. And for candidates, many of them 3Ls, the start of the school year, all of that. The parts of the application are all going to be out there, or they're in the template, and you can see online. So all kind of basic things there, which you can see. Tips for writing a competitive application, just keeping in mind it's a bit different than a standard job application. It's more like a grant proposal or a business plan. Make sure you're writing for that correct audience, and really focusing on fit. Going through common application mishaps. I think sometimes we get candidates projects that are really, really ambitious. I had one a couple years ago that was basically like, I'm going to fix asylum law through litigation in the First Circuit within 2 years, which I admire the ambition for, but was just not practical for a 2-year application. So thinking about that, distinguishability of the project. So a lot of our sponsors do pro bono, they're active in the community, so they're sort of aware of like other providers. And so when they're looking at a project or a candidate, they're kind of going like, well, but doesn't this organization over here do related work? Like, why is this different or why is this needed? So I think making sure you're maybe doing some like resource mapping or like being really knowledgeable and making sure the candidate really understands like where this work would fit within the existing landscape can be really important. Yeah, and the pro bono, again, the pro bono section is really important. There, make sure you talk to your pro bono folks about that. And then, yeah, typos and spelling or grammar. Lawyers were annoying, right? And we're annoying about typos. And I've seen it be commented on before. So make sure there aren't any. And yeah, again, keep in mind who your audience is. It's those sponsors, ultimately. Okay, so what next? Make sure you're checking out our website. So this is our screenshot of our application page. We have so many resources that are available here. So we've got frequently asked questions, again, the guides, examples when we have sponsor references, they'll be published there. Recordings of webinars will be accessible here. Kind of everything else will be on this page. So make sure you're checking that out. What should you be doing now? Make sure you're creating the account, review the blank application, make a plan for submission. And finding your candidates. First of all, like finding your candidates. Once you find your candidate, be doing this things. Okay, and now other questions.
Not seeing any questions just yet. I did just post to the chat though, just to reiterate, the fellow candidate will ultimately start the application process using the submittable platform. They'll be able to invite you as if you're a host organization staff member, collaborator in the application. They'll be able to invite you as a collaborator to make edits directly to the application. But just wanted to sort of note that the submitter, the candidate, the applicant themselves will ultimately be charged with submitting the application, both starting the application and ultimately submitting the application via the submittable platform. Um, so just want to note that. Um, and we have some guidance on using that submittable collaboration feature in our application content as well. Any questions? Feel free to drop them right in the chat or use the Q&A feature. We're coming up on time. And any questions that come to mind afterwards, you see the fellowship's inbox on the screen there. Please feel welcome to reach out. We asked for 2 letters of recommendation. And that's comes towards the end of the application, but we always encourage applicants to sort of reach out early in the process to start sourcing those letters of recommendation because they are required for submission. They're required fields for submission in order to actually submit by that September 17th deadline. Yes, we're going to plan. So, question if EJW will have webinars for students in July. We're planning a whole series of webinars over the summer between now and really the application closing. We'll continuously provide webinar guidance. So please stay tuned for more information there. We'll be posting that to our events page and also that Design Your Own Fellowships landing page that I've linked in the chat.
I will note, closer to the application deadline, we'll also do one that's more like really in the weeds for people who are already working on applications. So Rachel, your question about if 2Ls should attend, maybe I feel like that one is going to be a bit more weedy, whereas like we do have, we've already done a webinar for students that is recorded and is available. They could watch and they could do another one of our general ones. I would probably recommend that more for like a 2L. And then the one we'll do some like last minute kind of, we call them last minute tips and tricks webinars towards the application deadline. And those are a bit, like I said, a bit more like weedy.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Dexter. Thank you, Rachel.
Al, can you say where's the recording that's for students of the one we already did?
So all of our webinars are available on our events and um, conferences page. Also, at the bottom of that landing page that I mentioned a few times, um, if you click the Zoom registration link, you can register for the webinar after the fact, and you'll be given access to the recordings. And that'll go for all of our webinar offerings that we're planning right now. Let me just see if I can go ahead and drop here. This is our events and webinars page, but it's also available on that landing page, like I mentioned. And I'm going to drop that in the chat. You can see both upcoming and past webinar events there. Awesome. Thank you for that, Jocelyn. Perfect.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day and a good summer weekend for law school folks. I hope you're getting a little bit of uh, rejuvenation time.
Yes, indeed. Thank you all so much. Take care.